Wow, you've really outdone yourself with all this Christmas Eve stuff. Ancient rituals, modern feasts, everything.
It's quite the mix, isn't it?
It's like you're trying to become like the ultimate Christmas Eve scholar or something.
Well, it is a holiday packed with traditions, fascinating ones too, from both the religious and secular sides.
Yeah, I'm already kind of intrigued by this Bulgarian tradition, where they have like an odd number of Lenten dishes for their Christmas Eve meal.
Oh, yes, that's a unique one.
Why the odd number? That just seems so specific.
Well, it's tied to their Eastern Orthodox faith. They observe this Advent fast leading up to Christmas. So the odd number, it could symbolize things like the Holy Trinity, or, maybe the virtues of faith, hope, charity.
Ah, so there's a reason. It's not just about being picky eaters, I guess.
Okay, on a totally different note, we've got Cuba. And they're going all out. Whole pig roast for Noche Buena.
Oh yeah, the Cuban Noche Buena, it's a big community thing. They roast a whole pig in this special box. Ikaja China,
Wow.
and everyone's there. Music, dominoes, family, friends. Okay, that sounds amazing. I think I need to add Kaja China pig roast to my to-do list.
You should.
Okay, let's talk about the religious side of Christmas Eve now. It's obviously a big deal for Western Christians, but I'm always curious about like the specifics.
Well, in Western Christianity, Christmas Eve is called the Vigil of the Nativity, the day before the birth of Jesus.
Right, right.
A time of anticipation, preparation for celebrating Christ's coming.
And midnight mass is a big part of that, right?
Exactly. The service at midnight to officially mark Christmas Day.
But some churches have those masses earlier in the evening now, right? Makes it easier for families with kids.
They do, yeah. It makes sense.
Speaking of timing, I was surprised to learn that the Pope's midnight mass starts at 10 p.m.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe even the Pope needs a good night's sleep, I guess.
Well, I mean, think about it. The Vatican service, it's a massive event.
True, true. But let's not forget what it all means, right? Like Holy Night. Or even in Spanish, Noche Buena, which means the good night. It's all about the importance of nighttime and the nativity story.
Absolutely.
Now, what about Eastern Christian traditions? What's their Christmas Eve like?
Well, it's more solemn, like the culmination of the Nativity fast,
Mm,
which means strict fasting, deep spiritual reflection.
wow, so no feasting until Christmas Day. Big difference from that Cuban pig roast.
Yeah, quite a contrast. And their Christmas Eve services are really unique, too. They're structured like Good Friday services.
Really?
Yeah, emphasizing that link between Jesus's birth and his sacrifice.
Oh, that's really interesting. So it's a celebration of birth, but it's also acknowledging Christ's purpose.
Exactly. And you even see it in their iconography, like the Christ child. He's often shown in swaddling clothes that look like burial wrappings, and he's lying on a stone. It symbolizes a tomb.
Wow, that's powerful imagery. Okay, complete change of subject here. I came across this Lithuanian tradition where they leave the dinner table uncleared on Christmas Eve. It's for the spirits of their dead relatives.
Oh, yes.
Kind of touching, but also a bit spooky, isn't it?
It is a bit of both, isn't it? But it shows that connection between the living and the dead, especially during important times like Christmas.
Yeah. It really makes you think about how Christmas Eve connects us to the past and how we carry traditions forward, which reminds me of the Italian Feast of the Seven Fishes. What's the story behind all that seafood?
Well, they have 7 different types of seafood. It's thought to symbolize the 7 sacraments of the Catholic Church, or maybe even the 7 days of creation. Again, it's all about that symbolism woven into Christmas Eve.
Fascinating. So it's not just about a tasty meal, it's about connecting to something bigger, whether that's faith, family history, or culture. And it's interesting how they don't eat meat on Christmas Eve, just like the Polish Wigilia tradition.
You're right. Both traditions come from that Catholic practice of fasting before Christmas. And the Polish Wigilia is similar to the Italian feast. They also have a symbolic number of dishes, although the exact number can vary from family to family.
Interesting.
Sometimes it's 12 for the 12 apostles, or sometimes it's an odd number for luck.
Wow, so much thought goes into these meals. Okay, let's move on to gifts. There are so many different gift bringers around the world. Santa, the Christkindl, Joulupukki. It's like an international team of holiday heroes.
It really is. And even when they give the gifts varies, depends on the region and the religious traditions.
Yeah. In Spain, for example, kids get their gifts on Epiphany, January 6th. But a lot of other places, it's all about Christmas Eve. Why the difference?
Well, it goes back to the Protestant Reformation. There was a shift in some parts of Europe, away from St. Nicholas as the main gift giver. This was due to some theological changes. It led to a greater emphasis on the Christ child, or Christkindl, bringing gifts on Christmas Eve instead of St. Nicholas on December 6th.
So they shifted from St. Nicholas to the Christ child. And that changed the date of gift-giving in some areas.
Exactly. And that tradition spread to lots of German-speaking countries and influenced other areas as well. And that's how we ended up with this mix of traditions: the Christkindl in Germany, Julepuki in Finland, the Magi in Spain, and Sinterklaas in the Netherlands and Belgium. It's quite the blend of cultures and religions.
It's amazing how these traditions have evolved over time. Now there's this section called Other Traditions, and I'm really curious about the lighting of luminarias in New Mexico.
Oh, that's a beautiful custom. They line walkways and rooftops with these glowing paper lanterns. It creates a really warm and enchanting atmosphere on Christmas Eve.
Sounds gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then there's the Inuit New Year celebration on Christmas Eve called Queviasukvik. It's incredible how different cultures have created their own unique ways of celebrating Christmas Eve.
It shows how universal this time of year is. It's a time for gathering, reflection, and hope. And these different traditions just show the many ways people embrace those themes.
And speaking of hope, I think we should end this section by talking about the 1914 Christmas truce. During World War I,
Yes, it's an incredible story.
in the middle of that brutality, soldiers from both sides just stopped fighting on Christmas Eve to sing carols, exchange gifts, and they even played football together.
It's hard to imagine.
It really shows that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can shine through. It gives me hope that compassion and understanding can be stronger than conflict and division.
It's a beautiful thought to hold on to, especially as we explore all these different Christmas Eve traditions. They might be expressed in different ways, but they all share that message of hope, peace, and goodwill.
Yeah, it really is a powerful story. It makes you think, doesn't it? Even in conflict, there's still that human need for connection and peace.
Yeah, for sure. It's amazing, right? All these customs are happening at the same time all around the world, like the solemn fasting in Eastern Christian traditions. And then in Cuba, they have those big pig roasts.
It's kind of mind-blowing.
You really feel connected to something bigger than yourself, don't you? It's one of the most beautiful things about this holiday, I think. It goes beyond borders and cultures, and it brings people together through these shared experiences, these universal themes.
Like the theme of light, in the darkest time of the year.
Exactly.
And we see it everywhere, right?
Right.
Christmas lights, candles, even those bonfires they light in some Scandinavian countries.
It's a symbol of hope, of renewal, reminds us that even in the middle of winter, spring is coming, new beginnings.
And of course, we can't forget family, togetherness.
Yeah,
That's at the heart of Christmas Eve all over the world.
definitely. Gathering for a meal, singing carols, or just being together, it's about strengthening those family bonds.
It's a time for making memories, sharing stories and laughter, passing traditions down.
Traditions that connect families to their history, their heritage.
It's important to remember that traditions changed.
They're always evolving.
Families make their own customs, blending old and new, passing them down to the next generation.
Exactly. Traditions are living things. They adapt and change as the world changes, and that's what keeps them alive, meaningful. They're not just things from the past, they're expressions of who we are now and what we hope for in the future.
I like that. Each generation adds their own touch to the tradition. Speaking of which, I was curious about the seafood in Catholic tradition, like the Feast of the Seven Fishes. Why fish?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Fish has always been a big symbol in Christianity, like in the Gospels. Jesus calls his followers fishers of men, and the ichthys, that fish symbol. Early Christians used that as a secret sign to show their faith.
So fish and Christianity have a long history together. But what about the specific types of fish in the Feast of the Seven Fishes? Do those have any special meaning too?
Some people think so, like cod, for example. It's a common fish in lots of Italian homes. And it could represent sacrifice and humility, qualities associated with Christ.
Okay.
And then there's eel, looks like a snake, right?
Yeah.
Some see it as a symbol of transformation and resurrection because those themes are so important in the Christian faith.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. It makes a tradition even more interesting.
It does, doesn't it? It shows that these traditions are more than just customs. They're full of meaning and symbolism and history. It's a way for people to connect to their faith and their families and their culture on a really personal level.
It's like we're seeing this global tapestry made up of faith, family, food, and celebration. And by understanding these traditions, we understand each other better.
Beautifully put. And as we get closer to Christmas Eve, I encourage our listeners to be curious and open-minded. Let these traditions spark your imagination, maybe even inspire you to create new customs and memories with your loved ones.
I love that. It reminds us that tradition isn't just about holding on to the past, it's also about creating the future. And speaking of the future, we should talk about how the Protestant Reformation changed Christmas Eve, especially the shift from St. Nicholas to the Christ child as the main gift giver.
That was a big turning point in Christmas traditions, for sure. The Reformation brought about a lot of theological changes, and those changes affected all sorts of cultural practices, gift-giving included.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. The Protestant reformers focused on Christ as the center of Christmas, and that's why they moved away from St. Nicholas and put more emphasis on the Christ child, or Christ kindle, bringing gifts on Christmas Eve instead.
Right. And it wasn't just swapping one figure for another. It was about changing the whole focus of the celebration, putting more importance on Christ's birth and what it meant for our relationship with God.
So it was more than just changing a custom. It was about deep theological questions. It's fascinating how those debates still shape the way people celebrate Christmas Eve today.
It really is. It shows how tradition is always changing, shaped by culture and history and theology. It reminds us that even something as simple as giving gifts can have so many layers of meaning.
Yeah, like we're peeling back the layers of an onion. And with each tradition, we learn something new. And speaking of learning new things, I'm curious about those luminarias in New Mexico. What's the story behind those glowing lanterns?
Oh, it's a beautiful mix of Spanish and Native American traditions. They light these paper lanterns with candles and put them along walkways and on rooftops. It creates a truly magical atmosphere.
It sounds so beautiful. But is there a deeper meaning there beyond just how pretty they look? What do they symbolize?
Well, people often see them as symbols of hope and guidance, representing the light of Christ coming into the world. They also symbolize hospitality and welcome, inviting people to come together and celebrate.
So they're not just decorations, they're expressions of faith and community and the spirit of Christmas. Another great example of how a simple custom can have so much meaning.
Exactly. It shows how tradition connects us to something bigger than ourselves, to our communities, our history, and our shared human experience.
And we see that connection in so many different ways all over the world, like the Inuit New Year celebration on Christmas Eve, Quaviasukvik. It's amazing how cultures from such different places have made their own unique traditions part of Christmas Eve.
It really highlights those universal themes we've been talking about. Hope, light, family, togetherness. These themes speak to people across cultures and time, and they're expressed in so many different ways.
It's like we're putting together a giant puzzle. Each tradition is a piece. And as we add more pieces, we start to see the whole picture, a picture of shared humanity and how we're all connected.
That's a great way to put it. And it reminds us that even though we might celebrate in different ways, we're all united by those basic human desires for connection, for meaning, for hope.
It's a powerful thought to keep in mind. So as we wrap up this look at Christmas Eve traditions around the world, I hope you're feeling as inspired and connected as I am.
I am, for sure. It's been so much fun exploring these different customs and finding those common threads that tie us all together during this special time of year.
And I think we've just scratched the surface here. There are so many other fascinating Christmas Eve traditions out there just waiting to be discovered.
Oh, absolutely. That's what makes it so great. There's always more to learn, more to explore, more ways to connect with all the amazing cultures out there.
It's really incredible, right? All these different ways people celebrate Christmas Eve. From lighting lanterns to sharing special meals, it shows how creative and diverse we are.
It really does. Each tradition has its own special charm and meaning, but the amazing thing is that underneath it all, there are these common threads that connect us.
Exactly. No matter where we are or how we celebrate, we're all drawn to those same universal feelings. Hope, light, family, peace. It's a reminder that deep down, we're not so different after all.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it's something worth remembering, not just during the holidays, but all year round. We all share this planet, and we all have more in common than we might think.
So to our listeners out there, don't be afraid to explore. Learn about different traditions. Maybe even try something new. You might just find your own special way to celebrate the season. And who knows, maybe you'll even start a new tradition of your own.
And most importantly, remember the spirit of the holidays. Spread kindness and generosity. Cherish your loved ones. And let's all work together to make the world a little bit brighter. Happy holidays, everyone.